The United States faces severe decline. There is no question about it. I don't have the time to go through the details, but the level of public debt of the United States is frightening. It's just gone up to 38 trillion, and the GDP of the United States, 30 trillion. The performance of the economy is in the region of 1 to 2% per year, and now with Trump is contracting. And many countries in the world, by looking for cooperation with China through BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and the Initiative for the Belt and Road Initiative, they are engaged in what is known as de-dollarization. That is to say, many of them are actually trading in currencies which are not the dollar. And this has weakened the dollar as a weapon. And there is more. The infrastructure of the United States is sort of crumbling away, and the levels of trade deficit and military expenditure at the same time of the United States are 1 trillion per year. And the United States has lost the A++ ranking that it used to have with the bonds, treasury bonds. So it cannot really go for increasing the debt as it used to do. In other words, the United States is messed up. I wanted to use a different expression, but I keep that one rather. So the United States has drawn the conclusion that its imperial supremacy in the world is under threat by what we know as multipolarity. And the United States is trying to stop multipolarity by waging war. This is where Venezuela fits in. It seems to be easy, it's nearby, it's got significant amount of resources, particularly the largest reserves of oil. So this is really the context. So what the United States from 1999 decided to do was to actually build for itself a proxy inside Venezuela. That's where the opposition discussion about the opposition comes in. If you were to compare the frustration of the United States with Cuba and their ability to cause damage, a lot of it, to Venezuela all the time for 25 years, then the frustration is that the opposition to Cuba is in Miami, not in Cuba itself. And that is the result of the specificity of the nature of and the way that the Cuban Revolution happened. So from the very beginning, the United States began to disperse huge amount of resources to the key political parties of Venezuela, the key right-wing political parties, the historical ones, ADECO, I suppose everybody knows this name. If you don't, I'm sorry. ADECO, COPEI, Primero Justicia, Un Nuevo Tiempo, and later on, Voluntad Popular, and finally, Vente Venezuela, which is the political party of Maria Corina Machado. Just to give you an idea, between 2002 and 2012, the United States disbursed $120 million to support them. It supported everything around them, newspapers, television channels, paramilitaries, the political parties, you name it, they did. In 2012, the GDP of Venezuela was $389 billion, and the GDP of the United States was 16 trillion. That is to say, the United States was significantly larger. If you were to compare or bring it proportionally, increase the $120 million to the size of the US economy, that would amount to something like $5 trillion. Can you imagine? An external power financing internal forces in the United States to the tune of $5 trillion. You can imagine what the United States will do against such a foreign power. This is what the United States has been doing. But it is important to understand a qualitative development regarding this financing and regarding this support. The United States does not only finances the Venezuelan opposition, this extreme right, it owns it. In other words, it purchased it. It does whatever the United States it tells them. They haven't got any autonomy. They haven't got any political autonomy of any kind whatsoever. So anything the opposition does and has done and will continue to do depends totally on decisions taken in Washington, not by them. Therefore, and this is a sort of interesting dimension of the whole business, the failure of the opposition in Venezuela is the failure of the United States' inability to really develop the right tactics or the right strategy. And the reason is the United States is obsessed, and I mean, what people call the deep state, which is a term that I don't like. But we're talking about the CIA, the National Endowment for Democracy, and a few other shady institutions. They're obsessed with overthrowing the government of Venezuela violently. They prefer violence. Normally in the past, I've been around for a while. In the past, the United States preferred to do things in a reasonable manner. And if it wasn't too expensive and were not too many lives lost, it would prefer that way. But recently, they decided to change the tune. And the reason why they want to do it violently, and that's the role of this opposition, is to ensure that there is sufficient violence for them to be able to engage in massive purge and the eradication, root and branch of what we call Chavismo, what Chavismo actually. They will do exactly the same were they to control Cuba. So just to go through very briefly, in 2002, with the coup d'etat, just to justify that this organization is a terrorist organization, these parties, UNTV is in different dimensions, so perhaps it doesn't apply completely to it, but all the others, David Split and so on. In the coup d'etat, they tried to assassinate Hugo Chavez 3 times. And snipers actually, as we know, fired on the crowds of the opposition and the government deliberately to create chaos. Just the deployment of the Metropolitan Police at the time, led to the horrible repression. In the 2004 recall referendum, about 10 people died because of the violence of the opposition. The CNE was attacked. Lucena Tibisay's house was attacked. Many other houses were attacked. And the intention was to actually set them on fire. In 2006, for the constitutional referendum, they mobilized the students and they were extremely violent. And they were organized and deployed pretty much as in the color revolutions in Eastern Europe. In 2002, there was a coup attempt with a plane that was deployed from Colombia, of course, at the time. And the intention was to actually bomb the presidential palace with the president and everybody else inside. And at the time, the Human Rights Watch, part of the human rights industry, brought forward their annual report on Venezuela 5 months in advance to make it coincide exactly with that coup attempt. And of course, Chavez expelled them from the country, immediately, which was the right thing to do. Then later on, from about 2008 to 2009, the Venezuelan far right began to build strong connections with narco trafficking, and that helped their terrorist agenda. In 2008, there were municipal elections, and the opposition won in San Cristobal, in the state of Táchira, and in Maracaibo, in the state of Zulia, which are borders with Colombia. And that's when they made strong connections with the paramilitaries and the narco-trafficking gangs and so on in Colombia. Remember, this is a period between 2002 and 2010 when Uribe was actually the president of Colombia. And of course, as the president, he facilitated this massively. Then they had other opportunities, especially in 2013 for the election when President Maduro won by a small margin, and they unleashed a wave of violence, which was so horrific. They tried to set everything up on fire. They attacked, the health centers. They attacked Cuban doctors. They attacked houses. And the result was 16 people died because of their violence. In 2014, with La Salida, which people wrongly, in my view, translated as the exit, actually, this should be the ousting of the overthrowing. Again, they unleashed for literally 3 months, if not longer, a wave of violence in key places where they attack ambulances, hospitals, children crashes, everything they could. And the consequence was 45 people dead. In 2017, for the Warimba 217, they did exactly the same, but it was much, much worse. The level for violence were unbelievably worse. And the consequence on the research I've done, 147 people died violent because of them. They even went around burning people alive. They set up 9 people alive, on fire, alive. One of them died really horribly. So in 2018, when President Maduro called for the Constituent Assembly, the special one, they deployed their thugs, trying to stop people from voting violently. All of this has been suppressed in the international media, of course, all the time. And in the cases of the violence, the mainstream media, not to name any guardians, of course, they glorify in long articles with huge amount of photographs. They glorify this violence. And they presented these as rebels that were fighting for democracy, and the right-wing opposition was presented as beleaguered Democrats that were fighting against authoritarian dictatorial government. That was the narrative. In 2019, and this is an important one because they tried to, ratchet up the intensity of the violence, the Cucuta concert. They mobilized Chilean President Sebastián Piñera. Certainly, the government of Colombia was involved. Paramilitaries from Colombia were involved. The police of Colombia was involved. Sections of the army were involved. And they tried to force through military means food to bring to the supposedly hungry, desperate people that President Maduro did not want to feed. And the intention was to go in very heavily, break through, bring in military forces, occupy one town, make as a beachhead, and then call in a provisional government. They had Juan Guaido already in place. That was the purpose of the interim government. And then fabricate some sort of attack on this provisional government from this position, and then call on international support to defend the democratic government that's just been installed in this particular place. And of course, the United States responded immediately. This failed, thankfully, but the purpose of it was absolutely nasty, really disgusting. Then, in this period, is when we saw the pictures of Juan Guaido taking pictures of himself with key people from Los Rastrojos cartel, a gang of paramilitaries and narco traffickers. The DEA, the Drug Enforcement Administration, is right there in Cucuta. It's got offices, it's got a section, a building there, and they haven't done their job that we're supposed to do. In fact, since 2009, when the Defense Cooperation Agreement was agreed with the United States to install 7, if not 10 military bases to combat drug trafficking, by this time, 2019, the amount of cocaine production and the amount of coca cultivation in Colombia itself have grown by 30 to 40%, according to the DEA itself. My sense, and from the reports I've been able to read, the DEA was protecting, contributing, helping, the drug trafficking from that area. Then in 2020, there was the mercenary invasion I was not very happy at all when people, journalists, including from our side, called that the Bay of Pickles, because actually that did not, project the real intention. The real intention, according to themselves, was actually go from La Guaira all the way to Maiquetía, the airport, take it over, over the presidential palace, assassinate everybody, including President Maduro, and all the high command, military and political, of the Bolivarian Revolution. And then they've been given some immunity promised by Juan Guaido in the contract that is online. And Piglet Bay. And then the basic point was to actually give them the power, the legal power to actually purge the whole society from any possible resistance. So it was really nasty. Thankfully, it also failed. And then in the last few months, we have the terrorist plots that involve, Maria Corina Machado, Colombia drug trafficking, and so on. During the 2024 election, I was there, and they organized violence, and there were 2 armed attacks on the presidential palace and the National Electoral Council, armed attacks. And the intention was to actually go in and eliminate the president and, of course, proclaim Maria Bundo Gonzalez as the president who had claimed victory a few minutes ago, if not half an hour earlier. So everything they have done, absolutely everything was this. And the latest one is this one of the deployment of the fleet. I want to put that in a different context, if I may, Saheli.
Yeah, try to, round up, please.
Yeah, everything started with the increase of the bounty to 150 million on the head of President Maduro. That was the first one. Then the Minister of Interior discovered a huge amount of explosives, grenades, ammunition, and so on. And he said it was a scary amount. Thousands of explosive detonators were discovered. The idea was to actually create, as it was already reported, a huge amount of turmoil inside Venezuela. And then after that, the war fleet was deployed. In other words, the war fleet was deployed to assist internal rebellion and insurrection that was being organized. And then that was foiled because the government was acted more quickly. So the final point I'm going to make is terrorism continues to be openly encouraged by the United States, by these characters. I don't want to make any proposal about what to do with them to the government. That's the government decision, but I know what I would like to do myself. Openly encouraged Marco Rubio and Rick Scott, senators from Florida, Republican ones, actually put forward a bill which is known as Stop Maduro to increase the bounty to 100 million to bring it to the level of what Eric Prince, the most important or most famous or most infamous mercenary of the United States, actually require in order to do the job. So this is what we have to do. In other words, this is the moment really seems to me to actually expose completely with every possible detail, the nature of the opposition and the nature of the operation the United States trying to do with opposition inside Venezuela. Finally, I just want to, if I may, we managed to actually put forward to get publicized a statement from the Venezuela Solidarity campaign regarding a petition to the UK government to not participate in any way whatsoever, to be complicit in this operation by Trump and company against Venezuela, which was published by the Stop the War Coalition, which is one of the biggest social movements in the UK. So if I can put the link in the chat, if that's okay, I will do. Thank you very much.
Please.
Viva Venezuela, never ever give in. Thank you.
I'm Michael Hudson. I'm appearing here for the International Manifesto Group. If you like this video and ones like it, please subscribe. For more information, go to the address on the screen.